There is legislation making its way through the State House and the Senate that would require mandatory drug testing for welfare applicants. It was back in 2011 that this was deemed unconstitutional, but their new bills, they would require the drug tests only be for those who've convicted of drug charges or suspected to be on drugs. Joining us now is attorney Whitney Boan. Whitney, always good to see you.
Good to see you, Bob.
As we said, this was ruled unconstitutional back in 2011. I remember this fairly well. I also think that there was something to be said that it would be really expensive to do because you'd wind up testing a bunch of people, and that's not really the people who wind up being on welfare. But how have they tweaked this, and is that enough to get this through the legislature?
Well, first, your memory of this is correct. Back in 2011, the state ended up spending more money reimbursing people for their out-of-pocket expenses who paid for the drug tests and then passed them than they would have ended up paying to the 2.6% of welfare applicants who actually failed the test had they given them the benefits. But what's different now is that the bill proposes that there will be some modicum of reasonable suspicion required as it relates to DCF, who administers these TANF funds, believing that someone applying for the welfare benefits is actually under the influence of drugs. It also, though, only requires that someone be convicted of a felony involving a drug offense within the past 10 years. For someone convicted of a felony drug offense within the past 10 years, however, there is no reasonable suspicion required that someone believe that they're actually on drugs at that point in time. So I think that there's still going to be some blowback on this. I know you may recall from 2011, the blowback then was not just that this was a money issue, but that there was no substantial need for this to happen. There was no belief, there was no evidence at least, that people applying for welfare were more likely to use drugs than people that weren't applying for welfare.
That's exactly where I wanted to go, and I know that it may not be your area, it's more of a political area, but what's the push here to get this done? If there's no evidence to presume that people who are applying for welfare are on drugs, why are we running up this hill again?
Bob, I don't know, and you're right. I'm not in politics, but I think that it's very interesting that the state of Florida ended up having to pay $1.5 million with regard to the litigation that took place between 2011 and 2015 when Rick Scott ultimately decided to abandon the push for this legislation back then. So where we are is that this is going to end up costing taxpayers money. Okay. That's where we are. So the only other legitimate reason, and legitimate is a loose term that I could think of here, is that this is political pandering. Okay. And that's what we're looking at.
Say let's get back into the legal realm. Say I don't want to take the test if I'm, looking for welfare, and I don't want to take a drug test. Am I just out of luck on this thing? Is there any legal recourse I might have?
Well, I'm sure that someone will end up challenging this law if it passes. Right now, it's just a House bill. Okay. But if it ends up actually passing, I would suspect that just like in 2011, the ACLU is going to back somebody who is slighted or unfairly not given benefits as a result of this law. But you're not required to take a drug test per se under this law like you were in 2011 just by virtue of applying. There is some higher standard here in terms of there has to be some reasonable suspicion that the person's under the influence of drugs or has a prior felony drug conviction within the past 10 years.
All right. Well, we're changing the colors of the flag, but we're running up the flagpole one more time, I guess, right? All right.
I guess so.
Whitney, how can people, get in touch with you if they've got other questions, either on this matter or many other legal matters of which you have shown expertise?
Thank you, Bob. They can find me on Facebook under my firm's name, Whitney Boan, excuse me, it's B-O-A-N is my last name.
Okay, very good. Whitney, always good to talk to you. Thanks.
Thanks. Take care.
All right, you too.